Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle and thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com. Join us at the Sonic Cinema Patreon at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. For subscriptions as low as $1, you'll get added to the Sonic Cinema mailing list. You'll get exclusive access to movie reviews that will be posted before they are posted on Sonic Cinema. For $3 or more, you'll get access to commentaries that have never been heard before available online, discussions on the book that I'm working on, discussions on my music, and a lot more. And that is patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. Today, Today, I am glad to be joined by a friend of mine, once again, Marv Dickey. We've heard him already on the podcast that he and I did for The House on Oak Street, as well as Alex Proyas' Dark City earlier this year. Earlier this month was the 20th anniversary of the release of Peter Weir's Truman Show, and this was a movie that Marv suggested that we do, and it's should be a pretty entertaining look back on the first time where Jim Carrey really started to be taken seriously as a force to be reckoned with beyond just a rubber-faced comedian. So I hope you enjoy this discussion on The Truman Show. And please be joined once again by my friend Marv Dickey. We've already discussed a short film, The House on Oak Street, as well as Alex Proyas' Dark City. We're here today to discuss another film from the year 1998, in addition to Dark City. It's one that came out earlier in June, and it turns 20 again this year. It is Peter Weir's The Truman Show. And watching it for the first time in a few years, I think since I reviewed it in like 2009, it really I'm kind of curious as to how if Marv has watched the movie again recently, how he feels about it, because I definitely have a little bit of different feelings on it than I did back when I first debuted, as well as when I reviewed it before. So Marv, thank you very much for joining me.
Hi, Brian. I love you.
I love you too.
I had to start with trying to throw you off balance here.
That's all right. That's all right. It's appreciated.
It's good nature ripping. Yeah, I did watch it. I watched it a couple days ago. I was gonna watch it like 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and just take all my notes. But my fiance, Marissa, she really wanted to watch it because she had only watched. I think she saw it all the way through one time a few years ago, but I don't know if she watched it all the way through. So I'm not 100% on it. So I did watch it a couple nights ago.
Okay. One thing that this is I always had great appreciation for the film. I really love what it gives Jim Carrey to work with as an actor. I love what the script by Andrew Niccol gives him. I love the way he seems to thrive under Peter Weir's direction. One of the things it's kind of weird that I kind of there's actually a lot of it that I kind of forgot. I forgot how much of after the main credits where we get the introduction with Christoph as well as actor interviews. I forgot how much of the film is just following Truman Burbank, the Jim Carrey character's life, and just Weird kind of leaves us there, even though we see some of these things sort of come off as if sort of the facade of what Christoph has created is sort of coming off. But I like that it's a while before we really get pulled back into the notion of this being not real. I love how Weir and Niccol just really let us dive into this reality that Truman lives, and just put us there and sort of see this kind of unravel.
Is that where I step in?
I mean, it can be. No, that's fine.
I thought
yeah.
This was Jim Carrey's first shot at something serious, right?
Yeah.
If I'm
yeah.
correct.
Yeah, I mean,
and Peter Weir has a interesting. He seems to cast people a little bit off of what they're out of their comfort zone, so to speak.
Right.
In the past, he has. And I guess not so much Russell Crowe and Master and Commander, but I'm thinking more like Witness.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I think Jim Carrey, you could tell that he wanted something serious because he'd been doing the slapsticky comedy bit since the early '80s, really.
Yeah.
Was it Rubberface was his first movie, or was it like the show Duck Factory his first job? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
He's just doing. He's just done slapsticky comedy from In Living Color to Ace Ventura to The Mask and so on.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe. Never mind. I'm sorry, but The Majestic came out in '99, didn't it?
It was 2001 actually, but
2001?
yeah, it was after Truman Show.
Wow. I need to check my notes.
That's all right. But yeah, no, it was. I mean, technically, you could say the cable guy, he sort of branched into a little bit different territory with before Truman Show. But yeah, this was definitely the first one that was sort of sold as Jim Carrey dramatic actor. I mean, that was definitely the this was definitely the first one, and I think part of that was the collaboration with Weir and the screenplay by Andrew Niccol, who had already written and directed Gattaca the year before.
Okay. See, I'm not familiar with that writer.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of Gattaca, which I used to get lambasted for.
Yeah, it's an okay movie. I haven't seen it in a while. I haven't seen it since I saw it in the theaters. So I mean, I thought it was decent when I saw it, but it's not something that I've necessarily felt like going back to.
Okay. Did you want me to share my theater going story at the end, or would you like me to start?
We can go ahead and start there. I know I'll go ahead and do mine very briefly. I think I saw this once or twice in theaters. I know I saw it at least once with my mother and my grandfather when he was down after I was done with school, and we went to go see it, and I definitely liked it more than both of them did. I had real appreciation for what it did. I loved what Jim Carrey did. I thought Peter Weir did a really good job. I thought it was interesting. It was just a really kind of fascinating left turn for Jim Carrey.
I went into this thinking it was going to be another Jim Carrey movie. I didn't get the tone too much from the trailers, and I only saw a couple TV spots, and they highlighted a couple of the jokes that are in the film. So I went into it thinking it was another one of his comedies, and I was a big Jim Carrey fan, as were 90% of the movie-going audiences back in the day. The 90s were strong for Jim Carrey.
Yes.
And I went into it, and here's my story. I saw it once. It was, I believe it was the Sunday of opening weekend. It was like the last show. There was like 7 of us, I think, in the theater total.
Mm-hmm.
And I, being the jackass as always, I stood up because I usually grab the very front row because I love the big screen. With no depth perception, it works very well.
Yeah.
In case people are wondering what that means, I only have one eye. But I grabbed the front row, dead center. The movie hasn't started yet. It's like 10 minutes late. We haven't even seen a trailer. The lights haven't even dimmed. I stood up, like I said, as a jackass would, and said, "Hey, everybody, we don't need to see the movie. He dies in the end." And I hadn't seen the movie. I thought it was just a comedy. And not to bury the lead too much, and the spoilers, but I'm sure everybody knows we're going to be talking about spoilers here.
Yeah.
When the boat scene started, And at the end, where Kristoff is like trying to kill him, I was looking for an exit. And I legit had a plan. I told my buddy Mark, who I went with to movies all the time with,
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to go out this back exit. And in the same little mini mall, strip mall, as the Dunes Plaza in Michigan City, it used to be the Dunes Plaza. Now it's nothing. I think it's a Staples or something now. Was a Baskin Robbins. And I said, I'm going to run out this door the best a one-eyed, bad-legged, fat guy could do. And I am going to meet you at Baskin Robbins. Could you just pull up and I'm going to get in the car and go? And so I missed a lot of the boat scene because I needed a contingency plan because I think I just, like spoiled it.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't believe how right I thought I was going to be at that moment in time. I was frightened for my own safety. So that's my little theoretical experience with the Truman Show. I remember more of my panic attack at the end because there were some big dudes with dates in there. There was like 3 or 4 big guys that probably could have surrounded me and taught me a lesson. So that's my more. I remember that more than the film itself.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually kind of understandable that you would when you went into it, you kind of thought it was a little bit more like Jim Carrey comedy because of the fact that, I mean, the trailers didn't really point to how serious the movie was. And it did play off of, it looked like sort of an extension of his comedy. I mean, he'd done stuff like Liar Liar and stuff like that. So he was getting a little bit more. He wasn't quite as wild as he was at the beginning with Ace Ventura and The Mask, but he was starting to mellow out a little bit as far as in terms of how he was performing as an actor.
Yeah, and like the overtop, like the comparative scenes between like the bathroom scene where he beats himself up in Liar Liar, versus anything in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that I do notice in this film and I really like is the fact that I think it was if Jim Carrey was going to have sort of an introduction into more serious filmmaking, into more serious roles, I mean, this is a good bridge to that. This is a very good bridge to that because he can still play off of sort of the goofy persona he had because of the fact that so much of his daily routine at this point in his existence in the Truman Show is scripted. I mean, he's got his own tag, he's got his own catchphrase for crying out loud, and he's supposed to be a real person. But at the same time, it also does get into more serious ideas of just sort of the nature of identity and just sort of what do we tie our identity to, and how does our reality perceive sort of change what our identity is.
I agree. In just to kind of reiterate the point, although reality TV like such as Cops, America's Most Wanted, Real World, and like that had been around, this whole idea of following someone, one particular person, wasn't really there. It was always a group of people or little specific, like on Cops, a little bit specific incidents. And I thought it was, now looking back, it was far ahead of its time for following one person around because we eventually got reality shows that were exactly that.
Well, and the thing is, it's interesting, and it's sort of weird because of the fact that I kind of have mixed feelings about this film's idea of reality television now. I mean, on the one hand, you're absolutely right. It precedes the idea of a show that basically follows people around every day for day to day, and you basically see their life, and you basically see sort of the absurdities in their life, and you really sort of get the idea that there's sort of in like something like the shows you see on E, the reality shows you see on E or A Simple Life or something like that. That was, there's obviously a scripted element to it, but it's reality, quote unquote. But the thing that I've always found interesting is the next year, Ron Howard had the movie Ed TV with Matthew McConaughey and Jenna Elfman. If you look at that film, and it's been a while since I've seen that film, but I always loved it. I thought it was a wonderful film. That, I feel like, is, while I think the tone of Truman Show and sort of that idea is, it's definitely prescient to how reality TV works now, because of the fact that Ed TV was basically the idea of following a group of people or a family around, and once you follow one person, you follow their family and all the drama that happens with that. I feel like that was always more accurate to how reality TV is and how pop culture is in that respect. And Truman Show, the thing that I found interesting watching Truman Show this time was, it really struck me how artificial it all is. And I mean, that seems sort of really, it didn't work for me. The idea of a TV show surrounding a person, and the thing is, it's a fictional TV show surrounding an actual person where he's not in on the joke. And it feels so
forced.
Like, how would you do that? Yeah, I mean, forced.
It's a forced reality.
Yeah, and I mean that with social media now being what it is, it's like if you were to make this movie now, it would be a different movie because Absolutely. Of social media and all of that. And I think it's kind of interesting. A movie that came out last year, The Circle, with Tom Hanks and Emma Watson, I think is probably closer. It's not as good a movie as Truman Show is, but I think it's closer to what, if you were to make the Truman Show today, what that would look like. Because it's basically about somebody being involved in social media, and that's basically all they do. Everything about their life is available for contact, and everybody can watch in, and it's basically how that affects the reality. And I think that's one of the things that I felt weird about watching Truman Show now is there's a disconnect because of the fact that this is supposed to be a scripted reality, and honestly, it's like the idea that you could get away with this for 30 years and Truman would not catch on feels like it's completely unrealistic.
That's one of my major notes here is Truman's ignorance to the world around him. With like the scene with the guy popping out of the Christmas present saying it's not real, it's a TV show, it's not real.
Yeah.
Truman, I'm on the Truman Show, and versus Lauren / Sylvia telling him, this is all fake, it's all for you, blah blah blah. You think he would catch on, and then when the rain, that scene always irritated me. From when this was like my third or fourth viewing, but I tend to watch it probably about every 5 years or so, maybe 7 years, and it always bothered me. I'm like, this guy could have caught on to like something is technically wrong here.
Yeah.
You don't get rained on. You don't get chased by the shower. Just a small little spattering of rain, and then all of a sudden it just starts raining. Like,
yeah.
You would think on that for days and days and weeks and weeks. It might become an obsession to where you try to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one thing. Like that, I don't. His ignorance isn't believable, I guess, would be my best way of summing it all up.
Yeah. And that's part of why I still really like the movie. I still think it's a really good movie. It's a really great showcase for Jim Carrey and a bunch of the other actors that are in it. I just don't think it holds up the way that it probably should. And a big part of that is because of the fact there's an inherent unreality to it based on the idea that you could keep this TV show going where the star of it is completely oblivious to the world around him.
Yes.
Yeah.
It almost speaks to his low intelligence level, it seems.
Yeah.
Like Truman may have been, his life has been so controlled that maybe he isn't as smart as like maybe it's one other thing that Christoph controlled.
Yeah.
Because obviously Christoph has a god complex.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to control every last detail about Truman's life.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he moved into the garage, quote unquote, and he fell asleep,
mm-hmm.
like he was upset with his fellow crew members, so to speak, when they didn't inform him that after his wife had left that he moved into the garage. It's like, there's such a mundane detail that like he had to know about it, and he was upset he did not know about it, and it was an obsession that obviously led to him trying to off in the end. But
yeah, and I mean that's actually an excellent point about the fact that Christoph and the makers of this show are kind of, they've kind of brainwashed. That's not the right word for it. Not brainwashed Truman, but at least kept him so uninformed of the world that, that in and of itself, it's borderline criminal, really.
Yeah,
it's really criminal, and it's like I think one of the things that would made it more interesting on repeat viewings, and something that maybe sustained it a bit better, is if we had seen more of the outside opposition beyond just Natasha McElhone's character.
Oh, right, like the human rights activists.
Yeah, because
if they bought a baby, say a studio bought a baby for this whole sole purpose of creating the Truman Show, like in the real world, even in the 1970s or it would be 60s, right?
Yeah,
even
it would have been the 60s.
The hippies would have been outside that studio banging down the door saying this isn't right.
Oh yeah.
And hippie in the most kindest way, most gentlest way.
Yeah.
They mentally shackled him, like they handicapped him on purpose with creating the fear of water, so he doesn't want to leave the island.
Yeah.
Creating, the fear of flying, because why would a tourist, and that speaks again that there was maybe a low mentality created by Christoph, was if you walked into a tourist agency, a tourism office, and they got like frightening, terrifying flying like warnings everywhere, like this could be you, and it's a plane getting struck by lightning, and obviously there's other ones, like there's like fires and just plastered all over these walls. It's like you would think common sense would be like, why would you do this? This is like anti-money. It's like you don't want to have this. You don't want to make any money at this.
Yeah,
it's there's the little things in this movie that kind of hurt my head.
Yeah. Well, and for me, it was funny. I wrote down that, when Marlon tells Truman, it's like, I'd kill for a desk job. Like, for me, that would be a tip-off right away. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Why are you saying that? Nobody would do that.
Experiencing it every day. I don't want it. And he was a delivery guy just filling vending machines, right? I think that's what
that's what he was doing.
And that job seems a little more outgoing than office. Yeah, everything that they made him fall into is it's obviously like they said, it's controlled, but it just they're trying so hard to and Christoph even in kind of jump around here. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Towards the middle of the movie, kind of maybe 2/3 of the way through, before Truman runs and hides, there is a talk show hosted by the great Harry Shearer.
Yes.
I really like him. He's fantastic in the Christopher Guest movies and The Simpsons. And the whole scene is exposition for exposition's sake. and it irritates me because he's talking to people on the phone, and he's talking to an audience who has followed the Truman's life for
Yeah.
10,000 days.
Yeah.
Like they know all this, and it's like, why, this whole thing is just for me, for the audience watching the film. And it feels, again, another forced aspect of the
Right.
film. It kind of irritates me, but I understand that they got to cover, like, this is how it came to be, this is how we need to figure, this is how we figured it out, this is how we got here.
Yeah.
Then we have the people, like, we have the one woman who's against it, and everybody else is just like watching for the sake of watching.
Well, and it's interesting because of the fact that we did talk about Dark City earlier, and earlier this year, and there is a common idea in both of these movies, which is the idea of an individual rebelling against the reality created for him.
Holy crap.
That's essentially what Truman is doing. The more and more he starts to see the sort of what's going on, and sort of starts to question his own identity and his own reality.
That's got me mind blown over here, Brian. I didn't even think of the similarities between the two.
Yeah. I mean, there aren't too many, but yeah, I mean...
There. Well, I know what I'm doing for the rest of the night.
Watching Dark City?
No, just pondering. I'm gonna be like, all right, Truman Show, Dark City, Truman. It's gonna be a Jim Carrey scene. Now I'm gonna think about Ace Ventura. Oh, I'm doing. See what you did to me.
Sorry.
No,
but, we should say Christoph is played fantastically by Ed Harris. I think Ed Harris does a really good job in it. I mean, he got nominated for an Oscar. He deserves to be nominated for an Oscar. But yeah.
Yeah, he was great. And you really felt that arrogance of somebody who believes that they have a godlike ability.
Yeah.
And that's what also, like, what I was getting to, the whole scene with the exposition talk show.
Mm-hmm.
Christoph says he can leave whenever he wants. And he fought against the Truman's free will, so to speak. Like, he wants to be with Lauren/Sylvia. He doesn't really want to be with his wife anymore. And he starts to, as the film unfolds, he starts to see that his wife is not truly who he thought she was.
Right.
It's starting to unravel. He's starting to see who she is, and that she's not who he thinks she is.
Yeah.
And he starts, in his free will, like, he tries to escape the island, quote unquote, which means just the studio, and they did everything to get in his way.
Yeah.
Everything they could possibly do. And with him saying, in that one moment, saying that he can leave whenever he wants, it was an absolute utter lie, and that gets me. And Ed Harris, like, it's just so subtle. That's one of the things I liked about Ed's performance. It was just so subtle, but to me, it really got under my skin.
Yeah.
That he would say he has free will, but every time he tried to go, he want to go to Fiji. Oh, I can't book it for a month. Yeah. Oh, you want? I'm your wife. You want to go? You want to go to Fiji? Why? We can stay here and have a kid. Every step of the way, from even the nuclear plant meltdown.
Yeah.
That they chased him through the woods, and just to kind of wrangle him. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what they really do, is just like they're just trying to wrangle him, once he starts catching on to certain things.
Well, and the thing is, it's like, I mean, we're talking about this film, in terms of reality as we know it. The fact of the matter is, I mean, that's part of what makes this film, the unreality of it is part of what makes it satire. The idea that satire can typically go to extreme ideas in order to shine a light on reality. And I think there is some, if you're talking about this as an indictment on the media, as an indictment on that, quote, reality TV, TMZ, tabloid journalism that we started to see in the 90s and really came into the fold the past 20 years. Yeah, I mean, that's what Truman Show is. And the idea that, somebody's locked into a contract to have their life filmed, and basically, yeah, you can't do that because of this. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like this is kind of where I do feel like EdTV is a better representation. If you're going to do a straight satire on reality TV first, to a certain extent, I think EdTV hits the mark a little bit more in Truman Show. EdTV Truman Show is more of a fantasy and satirical look at it than just playing it for comedy and playing it for humor.
Right. It's also Truman is like in a cell, and
Yeah.
he doesn't know he's being recorded all this time, versus EdTV being more realistic to quote unquote reality television. Is they're aware of the camera surroundings and
Yeah.
they're able to respond in a more strategic way for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
People do have meltdowns on screen because they get pushed too a little too far. And people have meltdowns.
Oh
But
yeah.
So I see that there's a difference between those types, and like you're right, the EdTV is such a more better example of what reality TV has really truly become,
Yeah.
and that's idiots with cameras in their faces.
Yeah, I mean, I think when and you were talking about like the interstitials and the exposition for exposition sake in the interviews that or the question and answer that Harry Shearer's character has at sort of the middle point of the movie. I mean, the thing that I think there's another layer of satire in this is that it's basically against the it's a satire on the 24-hour news cycle, which had already been in place, but was ramping up to the point where, I mean, there are several different channels now where you have to have something on. You have to have something to talk about, and it's like, what are you going to talk about for 24 hours? It's like obviously there's a certain point where Truman is going to be sleeping or something like that. What do
Right.
you cut away from in
Yeah,
that
and
case? And I think that's part of where that comes from. I mean, like you're talking about, it's from a storytelling standpoint, it's kind of ridiculous, unless you're just looking at it as, oh, it's exposition. But the fact of the matter is, it's like it's also something. There's also something to be said about it in terms of the 24-hour news cycle as well.
that's you're right about that. Plus, the whole scene that during that whole scene, Truman's just sitting there at the kitchen table eating his breakfast, his cereal.
Yeah,
That's all that's going on the Truman Show. I guess it does be like, okay, he's gonna go eat food. Here, you can watch him chew if that's your thing. Like, but we're gonna sit here and just talk Truman Show. So I guess
yeah,
after 30 years, what else you got to talk about? But just like rehashing the
yeah.
same
And
fact.
I mean, it sort of goes into sort of like the the shows that you see after the shows now, as far as Talking Dead and uh, sort of roundtables for Game of Thrones and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, let's talk about what we just saw,
Or
and
even
like,
even
yeah,
YouTube channels. Yeah, YouTube channels are major like that. All right, the show just ended. Let's do this.
yeah,
Let's
exactly,
talk about it. I get that, and it does make sense when you see it from that angle. But it's still like it. Honestly, I think they should have taken that whole scene, cut it
hmm
out, and put it at the very beginning.
yeah,
If we got all that talk show when watching Truman chew his food at the very start, like a cold open, even we would it would I think it would fit a little bit better, and it wouldn't have irritated me as a viewer so much. And I absolutely love this movie. I don't know why I don't watch it more. Every time I watch it,
yeah,
I find something new that I like about it. And this time, it was a scene that I have watched many times, but it kind of stuck with me. Was when he was lost and they like cued the sun like a little early, like
yeah,
middle of the night. The sun's it's noon. When they call for everybody in their places, like in what they call it, step one or
uh,
placement one or
yeah.
when
It's placement
there's,
one, but it's basically like, okay, reset the take is basically
yep,
what they're saying in that case. Like,
yep,
okay,
absolutely.
reset the take. We're going back to, we're
Going
gonna
back to
redo this. So
first positions. That's what it was.
yeah,
First
first
position.
positions. That was it.
And there's a guy, it's African American gentleman who's on a bike getting ready to push it, and that part of me, like, something stuck with that guy. I've noticed him before, I'm sure, but it never really stood out. And it's just like that guy's just ready for action, and it sunk in that moment that they're not there just in case Truman shows up there. They're there because that's all they know.
Yeah.
If the sun just came up, I have to be here. And they were truly lost. They didn't know what to do when they couldn't find Truman. They were truly lost. They had no idea, and they were scrambling. You even saw when they were walking arm in arm with flashlights looking for him. It's like, what if he stood up, like, out of the bushes and saw that come together?
Yeah.
What would truly
Well, and the funny thing is, it's like the whole idea that, like, the actors who played his parents are like, oh, hey, it's mom, it's dad, come out. It's like, is he really going to respond to that? I mean, that's because you don't necessarily know what you kind of get an idea as to what Truman's mindset is because of the fact that he felt like he needed to escape and hide him escaping, but at the same time, it's like he realizes, wait a minute, there's seriously something not right with my world. How I need to try to figure out a way out of this, and whatever this is.
Right. Also, another point I like to bring up is Christoph. Obviously, this is supposed to be 1998. He started it in the late 60s.
Yeah.
And that's what we're kind of thinking. But it also could be without time frame.
Yeah.
Because we don't know when the people are viewing, like the man in the tub, the people at the bar, even the jerks at the bar that were wagering on his death at the end. We can't tell if this in the televisions, like the technology, sometimes it looks like it's brand new. Sometimes it looks like it's old. I can't tell. It's through the clothing.
Yeah.
I can't tell what time frame it is, and I like that about this movie because it makes it a little bit timeless.
Mm-hmm.
But I could tell that I don't know if it was intentional, but to me, Christoph seems like if he started in 1968, he is a baby boomer, which Ed Harris really is.
Yeah.
And he grew up in that nuclear family suburbia post World War II America. Yeah. So the island is designed just that, and it's
absolutely, yeah.
It harkens back to his own childhood and his own innocence. So
it's completely designed like a 1950s sitcom, and you see that in the way that Truman interacts with Marlon. You see that in the way Laura Linney, as his wife, reacts, and We haven't talked about her yet, but I absolutely love Laura Linney. She is absolutely wonderful in this movie. I love seeing the facade of her and her reality sort of come undone.
Yeah, where Meryl crumbles and Hannah starts showing herself through.
Yeah. Because she basically says, I can't work under these conditions. And it's like, yeah.
What? And then somebody do something, and they're supposed to be alone.
Yeah. No, I love
she starts
Laura
to panic.
And,
the one scene also I picked up on it this time. The scene where Truman is confronting her.
Yeah.
After in the kitchen at night, right before that whole somebody do something when Marlon comes walking through the door. She's so lost that she winds up starting to shill the products around the kitchen.
Yeah.
that kind of makes me laugh, but it's also a little bit like you feel sad for her because she's really panicking and doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
But if you watch the cameras, like when it's on Truman, when it's just a shot of Truman, it's like a steady cam. It's just like on a tripod. It's locked in place.
Yeah.
But with her, it's kind of it's like handheld. And it even like zooms in on her. There's a lot of movement, so there's even a visual disconnect between the two characters, as obviously Truman is unraveling their marriage basically in that scene.
Yeah.
Or the sham that there is, marriage.
Well, and the thing is, it's one of those things where and again, this sort of and it's something that I just noticed this time. I'm sure it's something I probably should have picked up on earlier, and it's the notion, you see these flashbacks of them in high school, them in college, and stuff like that. It's like they're not much younger than they are now. And so it's like, yeah, that's where this sort of you sort of lose the sense of reality here because of the fact that it's like, yeah, that was obviously shot by the same actors within the same time period because yeah, they probably would have looked a little different.
I called those
12 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. I call those the Lloyd Christmas scenes because he has the bowl cut, like Lloyd Christmas.
Yeah.
But literally, like Laura Linney's character Meryl is thrown into his lap when they see that he's catching the eye of Lauren, and Lauren's looking back. It's almost like a panic mode again, where just fall into him, just go fall into him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it almost it really does kind of make you feel for the actors to a certain extent to think about it in that respect because it's like they're actors, they see this as a job first and foremost, but it's like it's basically a day-to-day job where it's like they can't have a life of their own. No. It's like their whole reason for existing, they're in the same dilemma that Truman is in. The difference is they're in on the joke. And they're in on what's going on. But it really does make you a little sympathetic to those the actors playing around Truman because of the fact that it's like, well, I mean, they can't really do anything else. They're not really able to do anything else. It's like that's kind of sad in and of itself.
Right, and even Meryl has to do her wifely duties. Sorry about that. That's my pill. Time to take my pills. Sorry. She has to have sex with him.
Yeah.
To be blunt about it, like she was cast almost, as almost in some sorts like a porn star because obviously her heart's not in it.
Yeah.
She's not truly in love with him, or she wouldn't have crossed her fingers at the wedding.
Right.
She still sees it as a role, but she has to take these commitments, these steps to be a part of Truman's life. When, like you said, the sympathetic role, and then the people that get kicked off the show try to get back in, and that's what happened with his father.
Yeah.
Who they used to create a false fear of water.
Right.
To keep him contained on the island, so to speak. All of a sudden, he's back.
Mm-hmm. I think my favorite part of my favorite stretch of the film is when Truman's when he first follows Meryl to work, up until the point where they reveal that his dad is quote unquote alive. And especially when he's following her to work, he follows her into the hospital and the operating room, and then the building, and he sees the false back in the elevator and all of that stuff. It's like I really do love that stretch of film. That's probably my favorite stretch of the movie.
I would think that they would have that whole of going to the elevator and seeing that it's not an elevator scene. It sticks out like a sore thumb to me. Just the part with the elevator.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't they be a little more cautious about that? And why would they build that building without elevators?
Yeah, that's true.
I guess it could be just a facade of a building, just something you could never go to.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it goes back to the notion that basically Truman's life is so controlled. It's like at a certain point, he's he's a Pavlov dog, where it's like he's trained to do certain things and trained not to do certain things.
Right.
And I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's weird because of the fact that I hate to seem like I'm sort of bashing the film, that I don't like it anymore, because I do like it. I do really like it. I think it's still one of my favorite Jim Carrey performances, and I really enjoy a lot of things about it. But it's like watching it this time for the sake of this podcast, for the sake of this episode, it's like, wow, I can't believe it. It's really hard to imagine that this movie doesn't. It feels like this movie should hold up better than it does.
Oh, you don't think it holds up? I feel like it does.
It does in some cases. It does, and it doesn't in other cases. It feels a little. It overall, some of the things, especially at the beginning, where you start to see all of these things like the light fall down, and the all of the mistakes that sort of give Truman this conspiratorial bug planned in his head. It's like, really, why is all of that stuff just so happening now? Have there ever been cases where so many rapid fire things are happening that might clue him off to this, beyond just the occasional actor trying to show up on the show and try to sabotage everything like that?
Yeah, they've had 30 years to come up with so many I can't say that word.
Contingency plans.
You got it.
Yeah.
I got all fumbled on that. Yeah, they've had 30 years to go over every angle.
Yeah.
Like, why? I guess that's why they had the facade of an elevator in that little. I guess it would be kind of a soundstage almost. Within this.
And yeah, I mean the whole idea, I think, is basically like the entire thing is a soundstage. But it's like you've had 30 years to perfect this. It's like first of all, you wonder how long and how much money in the 60s it took to build this, and whoever decided the idea to write off on it and say, oh yes, this is something we should do, and we're going to really see a lot of money from this. I mean, that part is just, yeah, I mean, that's something you don't necessarily think about in terms of the movie, but when you watching the movie, but when you think about it afterwards, it's like, yeah,
you can't suspend disbelief.
Yeah, it's
like,
hard to do.
Oh, it's a whole channel. It's like the Truman Show is a whole channel, right?
Yeah,
it's 24 hours Truman. That part hurts my head because cable wasn't around in the late 60s.
No,
early 70s. It really didn't. It really wasn't around at all.
Yeah,
I think it was like 75, 76. I'm not 100% on that, but
right,
roughly that. Those things do blow my mind. Not really blow my mind, but they kind of they make you think, and it's just like, why does and really it takes them 30 years to catch on.
Yeah,
it took him 30 years after people like randomly telling him that there's something different about you. There's something different about this whole world you're living in, and he still just didn't get it.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is, I guess, it is also kind of a commentary on humanity, where it's like, to a certain extent, like we accept the reality that is given to us, as opposed to, sometimes we accept the reality that is given to us rather than find ways to change it.
Right.
And one thing, go ahead.
It's all he knows, I guess. That could be an argument against the idea of why his ignorance lasted so long. Was this whole world, this whole island that's everything he's known since he was a baby.
Yeah.
Since actually before he was born, because there was what they say, there was like 5 other babies competing, or
yeah,
4
or something like that. And the whole idea is that the babies were pregnancies that weren't wanted.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, yeah, you've touched, yeah, you've crossed your T's in that respect, but at the same time, it's like, there's a lot. there's a lot of it that comes out that's like, yeah, it's just very, yeah. I can't explain why all of a sudden, and I haven't turned on the movie completely. I still enjoy it, but
Oh,
and there's
absolutely.
still things I love about it. I love the music we haven't talked about, which was
Oh,
fantastic. I love the. I know Philip Glass did some of the music, and I think he had other. There were other minimalist composers who did other music, and I love the fact that it's like you have. That is one thing I will say that I love about the artificial nature of it is when they intercut, especially the scene where his dad shows up alive, and you just see Christoph basically orchestrating this whole thing, and you have the composer and the musician basically like building the music up, having it all in real time. It's a wonderful for somebody who loves film and loves the art of filmmaking. It's like that's fantastic.
oh
I
yeah.
love that. I'm
I
completely
can't. I
in the
can't.
moment with that.
I can't agree more. I even irritated Wheezy, Marissa. She also goes by Wheezy. Um, because I was like, look at this, man. They're like, look, they're building the score. The score is building.
Yeah.
Like they're putting atmosphere. They're building the atmosphere. They're making sure they're hoping and wishing Truman has a great reaction, and then he does, and it's like a Truman's reaction and their reaction to his reaction was like the climax of this big build with the music and
Yeah.
the scenes just came out just perfect.
Yeah.
And I was like, did you see that? And I rewound it and made her watch it again. Poor girl. She has to deal with that sometimes with me. I'm like, listen to how the music really builds this scene. I'm a big nerd when it comes to how music can change the atmosphere and the feeling that I personally have in different scenes.
Yeah. No, and I mean, as somebody who's a musician and who loves film music and and really appreciates the effectiveness of great film music. It's like, yeah, that's one of those moments where it's like, in that moment, it's like I'm completely in the movie because it's like he's building it up, and it's like you get that emotional charge,
You do.
and I feel, and I do feel like you get that at the end as well. And we talked a little bit about the end. You talked about the scene on the boat where they finally find him. He's out to sea in a boat for the first time since he was a kid, and they made him afraid of water. And Kristoff basically tries to kill him, and
Yes.
it's
That goes back to the complex.
yeah,
It,
and
it's like it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it was kind of those that feeling like, oh my god, my experiment is escaping. I gotta end this.
Yeah,
He's gonna find out the secret again. Even though I'll tell people on TV all day long that he has free will and he can leave whenever he wants.
mm-hmm.
He's still fighting it because I feel like Truman is he's Truman's God, and Truman is his Earth,
Yeah,
and he's looking over Truman as if in a more of like kind of a metaphor for God looking over all of humanity, or whatever, however the story goes.
oh yeah, it's
been a
very
while.
it's very Old Testament religion where it's like, if humanity gets too big for its britches, oh, I'm going to wipe everything out. And I
Yeah,
mean that's basically how Christoph, it's basically like Noah's Ark at the end
his
of that
his
movie
name's
where
got
it's like
Christ
where it's like, okay, my experiment is failed, time to drown it and start it again.
in it. Yep.
And but I will say it's like the moment he lets up, and this is where Carrey as a dramatic performance, his role as a dramatic performance really starts to come in, because I think you could almost make the argument that for most of the film he's not far removed from his comedic persona, it's just not it's just not as laugh out loud funny as his previous movies were.
Yeah, it's condensed.
And the ending of that movie with him basically with him in the boat, even basically practically begging for death to a certain extent, and basically asking them, "Is that the best you have?" I mean, he's buying into it as well, whatever it is. And then,
Right.
so when Christoph is forced to let up, and then Truman survives and runs into the edge of the stage, the edge of the studio, and then you have the moment where he it looks like he's walking on water, because if the parallels to and I mean that's where this movie sort of has a kindred spirit with Hal Ashby's being there with Peter Sellers.
Okay.
Has a little bit of that there. He's sort of quote unquote walking on water, and then he finds the door and he's ready to go through it before Christoph explains everything to him finally.
Yeah.
And the I love the way Carrey responds to what he's telling him, because of the fact that it's filled with anger, it's filled with honesty. He's feeling betrayed in that moment. It's like, and I love when he says his catchphrase at the end of it and walks out the door. It's some of the most honest. I think it's some of the most honest work we'd seen out of Carrey yet.
Right.
And that would
And even
carry over into things like Man on the Moon, things like
yes.
The Majestic, and then Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, Eternal Sunshine's amazing.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, it's easily that is very much the best movie Jim Carrey has ever been part of. I haven't seen it in a long time. I need to see it again. But yeah,
Maybe that's 99 was Man on the Moon, right?
yes, 99 was Man on the Moon.
That's probably why I switched it. And it's fun because even though they didn't share any scenes together, Paul Giamatti and Jim Carrey both went from Truman Show to Man on the Moon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's and that was something that's and I mean, Man on the Moon is a completely fascinating topic unto itself as a movie.
Especially now with the companion piece of Jim and Andy.
Yeah, which was absolutely brilliant. Probably one of the best documentaries about film I think I've ever seen. Really gives you more insight into Jim Carrey that I think we'd ever gotten before, and really I think it made me appreciate him more, just how much he committed to it and how much you see him sort of discuss why he approached it the way he did, and approached his art the way he did. Really makes me appreciate him that much more as a performer.
I do, but sometimes he can go a little overboard, and he's more on the pretentious side than the fair-minded side.
Yeah.
Sometimes with his description of his own performances, he could be a little bit self-indulgent, but I can't deny he's a good actor. He's really, really good.
Yeah, I mean I had a hard time getting into him when he first hit the scene with Ace Ventura. I did really like The Mask. I enjoyed Dumb and Dumber, but it's like I think I felt guilty about enjoying Dumb and Dumber because of how stupid it was. But I always love Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels working in that movie. I need to see Cable Guy again because it's been ages since I saw it, and I didn't like it at the time. I have a feeling I'd like it a little bit more now.
If you can hang in for 2 years, we can do a 25-year anniversary of it podcast for it.
Yeah, we probably could. I mean,
it was 95, right?
It was 96.
Oh, we got 3 years? Ugh, forget it.
But yeah, no, and the thing is, it's like Jim Jim, this is one of those, and I mean, I'll always defend the Grinch. It's like it's easy to kind of crap on that movie, but the fact of the matter is, it's like Jim Carrey really did a wonderful job with kind of a thankless position he put himself in, playing a such an iconic role,
Yes.
and he just did such a good job. It's like you can poke holes in some of the things that Ron Howard as a director didn't bring that film to life, but ultimately, I mean, he and I think he and Jim Carrey were ultimately respectful of what uh, the Grinch was supposed to be in that as well.
Oh, I watch it every Christmas. I watch it.
Oh yeah, yeah, I do
really
too.
enjoy it.
Yeah,
I have nothing bad to say about that movie. Even though a lot of people I come across, again, my inner circle of movie friends, uh, they've always given me crap for liking that movie.
mm-hmm.
I'm just like, screw you, it's good.
Yeah,
We'll watch it. You can go home.
yeah. I will say one more thing about the Truman Show, sort of before we wrap this up. There is one moment that's always kind of struck me when I see the movie over and over again. It feels like it feels like a moment where Truman is sort of catching on to things, even if he doesn't know the reality of his situation entirely. To a certain extent, you sort of get the feeling that he's starting to adapt and starting to really see that something's not quite right. And it's the moment when he's in front of the bathroom mirror, and they're like, oh, and he's doing all these weird things that makes them in the control booth go, oh great, we need to get Chris off. And he draws the space helmet, and he goes through that little bit of shtick. But it was always the line he has at the very end of that, where he says that one was for free.
Yeah, that one was for free. Yeah.
That always struck me as, okay, he's starting to catch on.
Yeah, he's super aware of his surroundings now.
He's starting to be aware of what's going on, and or at least that something's not right and something's going on and somebody's probably watching him. And that's a moment that, I mean, it's a really great little bit of business by Jim Carrey, who sells you on it and also doesn't tip his hat to the idea that he's sort of winking at the people who are filming his life 24 hours a day.
Right. I'm going to ask you an honest question here.
Yes.
And I can't pinpoint it to that exact point, but I think I kind of am close. At what point do you think he goes from being ignorant to being clever? I think it might have been the car ride where the radio messes up and he starts hearing the feed of them describing his positions and for people to, to get ready for it. I think it's there, but it may be a little before that or a little after that.
I think there were obviously things beforehand because, obviously you have the light fixture that falls down. You see him seeing his dad. I think in that part, that definitely points at where I think that definitely points to a part where he's going, what is going on, where he's starting to really get really
clues.
Figure things out.
Yeah, clues are
but
together.
by the time, I think it's when he starts following Meryl. I think when he starts following Meryl and when he traps her in the car. And he's like, oh, we're going to go to Fiji. And he basically, he recognizes the patterns that is like, oh, hey, all of these cars just happen to pop up at the same time.
Oh, that's right. Some with flowers, a beetle.
Yeah. And they go back into the turnaround, and then it's like, oh, hey, they're gone now. It's hard to pinpoint a specific time that
that he pivots.
That he really does pivot, but I think that's one of the things that's important. But I think it's also important to the movie and the success of the movie that it is gradual, that there's not an absolute point you can point to where it's like that's where he turns.
Okay.
And I think that's important that there's not a specific moment, but I think that you can definitely make the argument that there I think you can make the argument that there are a few places where he definitely has an idea of something more going on, and he's gradually starting to figure out that maybe I'm not as restricted. Maybe I'm both as more restricted than I think I am in terms of my life, but maybe I'm not as restricted by
Right.
my own thoughts and feelings about things.
It's free will, going back to the religion iconography.
Yeah, and I mean that's sort of where it ties in with me for Dark City, because I mean part of the whole point in Dark City is basically John Murdoch realizing, and the other humans that we follow in that movie, other than Dr. Schreiber, sort of realizing that there's something a little bit off about their existence, and trying to get to the bottom of why these questions are sort of coming up and what the answers are. And I mean, I think that is one of the things that I liked about the idea of doing this film after Dark City, because of the fact that there is a little bit of common ground between those movies, even though they're radically different. The way they do things and what they're ultimately doing, there are some similarities with those.
I do. You have no idea how much research I'm going to be doing, because I'm going on 2 hours of sleep as it is right now.
Oh man.
So I'm starting to get to that little bit of loopy stage.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm gonna be sitting here all night long until I pass out, and just be like, okay, Murdoch, Burbank, their last names end with sound. Okay, what do I do? Just keep going on and on. It's gonna be a weird number 23.
So oh my god, I didn't even think about the number 23.
You like that?
I was actually gonna make a reference to, oh great, I turned you into Walensky, the cop that goes insane in Dark City, but oh my god, yeah. I didn't even think about number 23 if we're talking about Jim Carrey.
See, I did that on purpose. You like that?
That was good. That was good.
I brought entertainment to your podcast.
Yeah. Wow. Number 23. I haven't. I try not to think about that movie. I did not like that movie at all.
Oh, I enjoyed it.
I haven't seen it in like 11 years since I saw it in theaters. I don't know how I would feel about it now, but I might try to give it another chance at some point.
Well, if we didn't live 1,000 miles apart, I could lend you my copy.
Yeah, that's true.
And I will grab about 1,000 off of your shelf.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, Marv, I think I've said everything I need to say about the Truman Show. Is there anything more that you wanted to say?
If you've made it this far and you haven't on the podcast, I'm talking to the listeners. If you made it this far and you haven't seen the Truman Show and you're still okay with all the spoilers, I absolutely 100% recommend the Truman Show to anybody and everybody. It's a fantastic, almost fantasy film, I guess.
Yeah, it really is. It really is a fantasy film. Yeah,
it's good. It's really good.
And it's interesting to look at through the prism of the career not only of Jim Carrey, but also Peter Weir, the director, who after it did Master and Commander, which was fantastic with Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany. And then
I like 23. You didn't, and you like Master and Commander, and I did it.
Yeah,
we're even.
I'm sorry.
We're even.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, go ahead.
Peter Weir also did Fearless. He also did Witness. He did a couple of Mel Gibson's early films, Gallipoli and Year of Living Dangerously.
The Way Back.
Let's see, trying to think, what else did he do?
Green Card.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Dead Poets Society.
Oh, God, how could I forget Dead Poets Society?
Yeah, Brian.
seriously.
Where
I
you
think
at?
I'm and the funny thing is I'm rewatching that movie or I'm watching it. I don't remember if I've actually ever seen it all the way through. I can't remember. I want to say I have. But if
Oh,
I
really?
have, it's been a while. But I'm actually getting ready to rewatch it for a movie a week in a couple weeks, so that makes it even more baffling that I forgot it. But
I, s- I was dragged to the theaters when I was like 9 to see that movie,
uh huh.
and I came out of that movie going like carpeted diems, carpeted diems. I seriously, my brain couldn't think Latin as a 9-year-old, and I don't understand why because I kind of understood Latin,
Yeah.
not the language itself, but I understood that Latin was a thing. But I was just like carpeted diems, and I was thinking it was a product that they were trying to sell in the movie. I missed the point big time until I was like 15 when I rewatched it.
Yeah. I don't, yeah, and I think part of the reason why I never really watched Dead Poets Society when I was a kid is because my mother wasn't the biggest Robin Williams fan.
Mm.
So I mean, she just wasn't. I mean, we would occasionally go to his movies, but ultimately she wasn't like she didn't she wasn't a huge fan of his. So I think that's part of why I never really got into. I mean, I by now I mean I've at least watched at least part of like Dead Poets Society and Good Morning Vietnam, and earlier this year I finally watched World According to Garp and all of that. But it's like I never really had Robin Williams as somebody that I really appreciated a great deal when I was growing up. I mean, I definitely have more of an appreciation of what he does now. But
I I always loved him,
mm-hmm,
uh, and that was one of the reasons why I was okay with getting dragged there. But it was not a movie for. I guess I was 10 because it came out in '89.
yeah,
But it's not a movie for 10-year-olds for sure.
no, no,
It doesn't. Plus, it's a little long in the tooth when you're 10. Any movie over an hour and 20 minutes is kind of
yeah,
a little bit long. And I was always a fan of his. I saw his stand up. I would watch Carlin on HBO in the early '80s.
mm-hmm,
His old stand ups. And Robin Williams had a stand up special that we rented a couple times when I was younger as well. And I loved it. I watched Mork and Mindy like crazy. When that episode that he showed up on Happy Days, whenever that showed that came on like reruns,
yeah,
I absolutely enjoyed it. Uh, Robin Williams was my guy, and he wasn't one of my idols like a John Candy or like a Sam Kinison, the fatter. Like I leaned more towards the chubbier comedians, the people
uh
that
huh,
made people. But Robin Williams, whenever he popped up in something, I had to see it. And it's funny because I just found Boulevard, his final film, on on Hulu, and I added it to my queue last night, and I plan on watching that soon.
okay,
So his loss was like it hurt because
yeah.
I had a lot in common. He even had a pug named.
Oh, shoot, are you still there? Okay, so I'm sorry. What were so you were talking about
Oh,
Robin Williams?
my common ground with Robin Williams, and like he was a big fan of the Legend of Zelda series. Hence his daughter's name is Zelda after the video games.
Mm,
I got a Legend of Zelda tattoo because it's always been there for me in the bad times of my life. And so like when he passed away, like it killed me, and I've slowly gone back over uh, his major films
yeah,
from Aladdin to Hook to through since he passed away. I've gone through and kind of appreciated the man a little more
yeah.
now that he's gone. So and I can't believe Hulu finally has, or I finally found it on Hulu. I don't know how long it's been there, but Boulevard's there, so I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think like uh and I think like Robin Williams to a certain extent. I mean, Jim Carrey is somebody who I think to bring this back to the ultimate conversation we're having about Jim Carrey and the Truman Show.
Yes.
I mean, although we did get to Robin Williams from Peter Weir, but I do think
Sorry.
that ultimately Jim Carrey is somebody who, when you strip everything else away, I think he's somebody who I don't think he's going to linger quite as large in people's memories and people's feelings as Robin Williams does. But I do think that the things that people love about him, I think you're going to see an appreciation for what he did and how he did it. Whether you're talking about Ace Ventura, whether you're talking about the Truman Show, Dumb and Dumber, The Grinch, Man on the Moon, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I think you're going to see he's somebody who is definitely carved out a very particular niche for himself in the same way that Robin Williams did. And I think that's something that when all is said and done, I think that's something that he's ultimately going to be more admired now than I think a lot of people would have necessarily expected him to be when he first started off in movies.
Right. I'll let you wrap up the episode before we ramble on about other child idols.
Well,
but they do have a parallel career because they both started out as slapsticky comedians that had to break the mold. They had to break out of the typecast of the slapsticky, goofy comedian to find their own heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Robin did that very well in many films.
Oh yeah, and I think that's one of the things that and it's one of the things that probably I would imagine that it's like that's one of the exciting things that Peter Weir probably saw in Jim Carrey when they worked on the Truman Show, because of the fact that he does have that similarity and that similar trajectory that Robin Williams had. And he worked with Robin Williams at a moment where Robin Williams was starting to establish himself more beyond just being a comedic force to be reckoned with.
The guy who talks out of his butt.
Yeah. And so, it makes sense that both of them would work with Weir. And the thing is, it's like for everything I said today about the Truman Show being sort of artificial, I think there is a genuine sincerity to it, and it comes from Jim Carrey. It comes from Jim Carrey as Truman Burbank because of the fact that that's one of the reasons why, even though I kind of criticize the movie a lot on this episode, I ultimately love it because I love following Truman on this journey of self-discovery that he has. And that's because of Jim Carrey.
Yes. And if, honestly, like, I don't want to keep stretching the show, but if you could pick some, like, I don't know how well you know comedians or any actors, if you could pick anybody for Peter Weir to work with next, like if he were to make another film, I know he's like 70, 74, 75.
Yeah. And he hasn't worked as much in recent years that they used to. Last movie I saw of his was like 2010. I can't remember what the actual last movie he did was.
It was you're right. It was the way back in 2010.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, it's like it's a weird, it's kind of an interesting question. It's like, I can't really think of somebody who's hot now that I think would really be an interesting sort of collaborator in the same way Robin Williams or Jim Carrey is. You and I were going back and forth on Facebook earlier today about Adam Sandler and Punch Drunk Love. And it's like, I think if he had hit with Sandler around that time, I think it would have been a more interesting. I don't know how modern day Adam Sandler and Peter Weir would fit. It would really depend on the material. But as far as comedians working now, I don't really know.
I have my pick.
Okay.
And I would like to see him, directed by Peter Weir, playing a sympathetic villain type. And that would be Jim Parsons from The Big Bang Theory. Dr. Sheldon Cooper. Imagine him as a sympathetic villain. I think he would knock it out of the park, and I think Peter Weir would be an amazing director to do that. And I'm sure there's 100 other guys that would direct it too. But
Oh yeah,
the feel of Peter Weir's films, I think, would be the right tone for a character like to thrive. So that's just my pick for that. And I think it'd be kind of great to see Jim Parsons in a different role.
Yeah, and that's definitely an interesting. It's definitely an interesting pick. It's like I wasn't even. I was thinking people more known for film than TV, but yeah,
TV.
I mean, it would be an interesting. I think Jim Parsons with any heavy hitter director sort of getting away from Sheldon Cooper would definitely be interesting to watch, regardless of what the project is. I think seeing him and I mean I can sort of see, that would be kind of interesting to see. Well, Marv, thank you very much.
It's either going to be amazing or it's going to be. Oh, anytime, man.
Oh yeah. What were you going to say right away? Right.
As I say, it's either going to be amazing or a car crash.
Yeah. I mean,
there's not going to be in the gym.
I can't imagine it would necessarily be a car crash. I think he's too talented for that, but
he's competent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something to think about. But yeah, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Brian, and I still love you.
I'd like to thank Marv Dickey for joining me tonight to discuss the Truman Show. We're going to have another conversation later in the year talking about Dazed and Confused as it turns 25 this year, the Richard Linklater film. For now, thank you very much for joining me at the Sonic Cinema podcast. I've got more filmmaker interviews coming up. I've got Chris Esper returning, where we're going to discuss one of the great filmmakers of the French New Wave. I've got more film breakdowns coming up, and I've got some really special ideas for what we're going to do in 1999 for the podcast. If you can, contribute to the Sonic Cinema Patreon at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. There's a lot of good stuff for you there. And for now, this is Brian Scuttle. Thank you for joining me at the Sonic Cinema podcast.